Back to America's Forum right here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman.
And I'm J.D. Hayworth. John, keep your hand on your wallet. It's time to talk financial matters. On the heels of its best and worst states for taxpayers report, the personal finance social network Wallethub has released a new analysis illustrating which states it claims are the most and least dependent on the federal government. Wallethub compared the 50 states as well as the District of Columbia in terms of three primary metrics. Number one, return on taxes paid to the federal government. Number two, federal funding as a percentage of state revenue. And number three, the number of federal employees per capita. They found the more dependent a state is on the federal government, the less likely it is to charge high tax rates. Seems there's a 34.4% correlation between a state's federal dependency and its tax rates. In other words, the more dependent a state is on the federal government, the less likely it is to charge high tax rates. Red states, those are states voting Republican in presidential elections, with an average dependency ranking of 33.5, are altogether more reliant on federal funding than blue states, which rank 19.2 on average. The smaller the ranking, this analysis claims, the less dependent a state is. Now, there's a 56% correlation between a state's federal dependency and its per capita gross domestic product. That means the least wealthy states tend to be those receiving the most federal support. 8 states have below average tax rates and federal dependency, while 9 states have above average tax rates and federal dependency. The top 3, according to this study, the top 3 least dependent are Delaware, Illinois, and Minnesota, and the 3 most dependent, one of them the state I used to represent in Congress, Arizona, South Dakota, and West Virginia. John, you might expect that I may have to take polite issue with our next guest, but we're always happy to welcome John Kiernan, Senior Analyst at Wallethub.com. John joining us by phone today. And John Kiernan, we welcome you once again to America's Forum.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Now, John, I take a look at this, and the methodology utilized is unique, the 3 metrics you're using, because I can think of a host of outside data and things not apparently taken into account that set up what I believe, forgive me, but this seems to me to be a false correlation. Now, you make the case for why you use the parameters you used for this study and what it should prove to us in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any study of this nature is going to be 100% accurate because there are so many different factors to take into account. But given how complex kind of local tax codes are and the dynamics that go into different states receiving different amounts of federal funding, we felt it was kind of important to simplify things as much as possible, and so we really tried to think about what would get to the heart of the issue based on kind of the data that is available. And so we, as you mentioned, we looked at 3 different primary metrics. And the return on taxes paid to the government is simple, just how much federal income taxes your state's paying and how much compared to the federal funding you're receiving. There is a big gap between states in that regard. Some states are receiving about 50 cents on the dollar, and other states are receiving almost $4 or $5 for every taxpayer dollar. So that is kind of a big disparity that I think people would be interested to figure out that's going on. The federal funding is a percentage of state revenue. Obviously, kind of certain states have more in the bank that they could tap into than others, but it's just kind of a simple fact that if you're getting a lot of your state revenue from the federal government, if that funding amount changes, you're going to have to use other funds or cut back on certain things.
Well, let's take, for example, you have Arizona leading the way, and I know a little bit about Arizona, having represented the Grand Canyon State in the Congress of the United States for 12 years. Something as simple as an aggregate study of the population would show you that there are a high number well, to put it bluntly, illegals in Arizona, though allegedly they're undocumented. They've been able to get access to entitlements. That's point number one. Also, a huge influx of retirees who obviously have Medicare, and then you add to that the fact that there's a significant agriculture base in Arizona still, with cotton and also with cattle ranching. But here's the rub: in Arizona, over half the land is held in federal trust, so farmers in the grasslands of Arizona have to petition for and basically rent land from the government. So there are all these unique mileposts, if you will, or metrics for Arizona that I don't believe is taken into account. And when you say a return on investment of tax dollars, we had to make the case for a long time in Arizona when it came to transportation money. Arizona was a donor state. For every dollar in taxes we paid to Washington, we were getting back somewhere in the neighborhood of 89 to 90 cents. So I have to, with all due respect, the metrics, and I understand the challenge of trying to put together a study that's broad-based that fits 50 states in the District of Columbia, but I think a basic question of who the people living in the state are and how that all works together along with the histories of the state have to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are definitely fair points, and there are a lot of local factors that kind of could have been perhaps taken into account with more resources. But I think kind of a lot of the things that you're saying perhaps would be displayed in the data. I mean, when you're just looking at the federal funding compared to taxpayer dollars, even federal official funding that maybe is kind of mistakenly going to illegal immigrants or things like that would be played out in that figure. I mean, obviously you wouldn't specifically call out kind of how much is going to people who aren't official citizens, but you still get.
Let me give you another example. Let me give you another example unique to Arizona. The Navajo Nation and some 23 federally recognized tribes where there is a tribal trust relationship, and where by law, despite the tribal sovereignty, there is a substantial government largesse issued every week to any number of Native Americans within the state of Arizona. Again, another permutation not accounted for in the analysis. It's not to indict the study overall, it's just to say, with all due respect, and I appreciate, John, the difficulty of trying to find an aggregate, trying to find 3 metrics to use for all 50 states, but I think drilling down state by state, you might come away with some very different data.
That's perhaps true. I mean, you don't think those grants are illustrated in the amount of federal funding that the state receives?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. I'm not trying to dodge it, John, but I think it's open to discussion. And suffice it to say, you are someone who captivates us with these points from Wallethub.com. So we look forward to our next discussion. Perhaps we can pick this up and talk a little bit more about this correlation. But John, we appreciate the efforts you make, and we'll continue to check out Wallethub.com.
That's right. These issues are very important when you're dealing with taxes and how much states get from the federal government. More to come on America's Forum. We'll be back right after this.